Top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Trip Over to BoxRec revealed that Shanika Johnson's very next fight is all set to go down in March of next month, 3 months into the year of 2022. That being said, it doesn't look like Shanika is going to be making any ring appearances before this year is out, bringing the her grand total of fights in the year of 2021 to just one fight, a loss to Shotgun Shannon O'Connell. And I can't help but think to myself that this has not been a very productive year for Sugar Neeks, Shanika Johnson. You have to consider that a fighter with even less pro experience than Shanika has, she very recently locked horns with Shotgun Shannon O'Connell, and she very recently suffered her first professional loss this year, the same way that Shanika suffered her first professional loss this year, with the difference being that this fighter is all set to get back out there, get back on that saddle, get back on that horse against Kylie Fulmer.
Talking about Taylor Robertson.
Taylor Robertson lost that Shotgun Shannon O'Connell fight late last month on the 23rd, but she's all set to rebound next month, early next month, on the 4th against Kylie Fulmer. Common opponent between Taylor and Shotgun Shannon O'Connell, whereas Shanika Johnson, she fought Shannon months ago, way back there in March of this year, and now she's not set to make her ring return until March of next year. That's basically saying that when she gets back in there, it will have been a year's time. She will have lost a year between the both of those fights.
That's allowing unnecessary ring rust to collect.
Shanika's a young fighter. She's only 26 years old, so she's got time, but why waste it? Why squander it when you don't have to? I think comparatively, Taylor Robertson's people, they've got the right idea that yes, their fighter, they might have lost a fight, but Taylor Robertson didn't get hit too much in that fight. She didn't suffer any cuts, bumps, scrapes, or injuries, so why not get back out there and rebound before this year is out so you can start the next year in the winner's bracket?
Start 2022 off with a W.
I want to say I think Taylor Robertson has everything it takes to win a points decision against Kylie Fulmer early next month, and I want to say that I would have liked to have seen Shanika Johnson 1 or maybe even 2 more times this year.
Because she's hot?
Well, yeah, that. She's talented. Shanika Johnson really does belong at the forefront of today's women's bantamweight division because she really is a quality operator. And there's no shame in her having suffered that loss to Shotgun Shannon O'Connell because Shotgun's about as tough and experienced as they come.
It's not like Shanika got ragdolled out there.
It was a close fight, was a tight fight, but what it wasn't was a war, as Shanika Johnson's defensive tactics and evasive maneuvers greatly offset the aggression from Shotgun Shannon O'Connell. Shannon won, but she didn't have it all her way. That being said, Shanika's set to make her next ring appearance early next year in March on the undercard of Michael Zarafa's first fight of that year. You see, Michael Zarafa, he's actually got 2 fights booked. 2 fights on schedule. One before this year is out, and another in March. That's where Shanika Johnson's going to be making her next ring appearance. Just thinking to myself, if this guy can work on this kind of schedule...
Couldn't they have gotten Shanika a slot on his next card?
Not the one set to go down in March of next year, the one set to go down in December, next month, on the 17th.
Before the end of this year.
Couldn't they have gotten young Shanika Johnson a slot on that card so she can at least rebound off that loss to Shotgun Shannon O'Connell before this year is out? I really don't know. But Shanika, she is a dark horse. She is a talented fighter, and she's a looker.
Which commercially can go a long way.
This is yet another fighter, like Shannon Courtenay, like Ebony Bridges, that can help bring attention, help bring eyes to this division because she's got something for everybody. She's definitely got the skills to pay the bills. There's genuine talent there and boxing ability, but not just boxing.
It takes a certain genocide quality to rise above the vulgars and the Gentiles.
Shanika Johnson exhibits a high ceiling. She could go all the way, and one day with the right backing, she could see herself becoming a world champion because that's the kind of talent that she has. It's just a pity that she's only fought once this year and suffered a loss.
See you next year.
In middleweight news, reigning WBO champion Demetrius Andrade has turned his attention to one of his contemporaries, Charlo, and his promoter, Eddie Hearn, has declared that he's written to both the WBC and the WBO, asking them to order the Charlo versus Demetrius Andrade unification fight by making Andrade mandatory for Charlo. And
it could happen.
The WBC has actually done this before. They have. They did it with Mikey Garcia, their then reigning WBC lightweight champion, and Jorge Linares, the then reigning WBA and Ring Magazine lightweight champion. This was years ago, An order came down from the WBC for those two guys to fight. But the difference with that situation and this one is that Jorge, the then reigning WBA champion, he held a lesser version of a WBC title. A WBC diamond belt that can be used as a segue to fight for the full title, thus giving precedence for such an order. Now, the fight got ordered, but it never materialized. Nothing happened, and no one was stripped. The WBC didn't show teeth in that situation. There was a lot of bark, but not a lot of bite.
I think they ordered Gary Russell to fight Leo Santa Cruz, too.
And that fight, like this one, didn't happen. WBC champion Gary Russell Jr. wanted the fight. The problem was the WBA's champion Leo Santa Cruz, he didn't want it then, he doesn't want it now. The same applied to Jorge Linares and Mikey Gersha, and I think the same would apply to Jermall Charlo and Demetrius Andrade.
Go ahead, order the fight.
But if Jermall Charlo doesn't comply, if he doesn't abide by the WBC's order, is the WBC going to show some teeth and strip him?
They strip him of the WBC title?
Because you can issue out a mandate. You can issue out mandates till you're blue in the face. If those mandates don't come with penalties attached, it's all for nothing. The WBO's president, Paco Veracel, recently chimed in on just this matter, and he said in so many words that he's powerless in the situation, that as a lawyer, he knows he can't order someone else's champion to fight a WBO champion.
Ultimately, Jermall has to want the fight.
It takes two guys to make a fight, but it only takes one to fuck it up. I say it all the time, and if Jermall doesn't want the fight because he's shameless, thus he can't be shamed into having the fight, if he doesn't have enough of a sense of pride in his craft and what kind of fighter he is, how he'll be remembered.
There's very little that can be done about it.
He's quite content fighting nondescript opponents for nominal purse amounts, name-dropping fighters with more marquee value than himself, like Gennady Golovkin, like Canelo Alvarez, for fights he knows.
You're not even on their radar.
Gennady Golovkin's going to be in action in Japan against their superstar, Ryota Murata, a guy with more celebrity in his country than Jermall has here in America.
Jermall's not a fucking star to be acting like this.
He really isn't above fighting Demetrius Andrade. For Jermall Charlo, that would be the biggest fight of his career. A unification match with his longtime rival, one of his contemporaries, who's in a very similar place in his career to where Jermall is in his. They're both two division champions, both guys that moved up from 154 pounds, and both guys who right now ain't got no dance partners. The very disgusting Leonard Ellerbe took to social media to react to this news and stated, "Am I missing something? Doesn't Munguia have Triple G and Jacobs all fight on his platform? All are very good fighters. He's the one with the big $1 billion deal. He should go make the fights. Didn't he say people like Charlo, there are no fights for him at middleweight unless he fights on DAZN?"
Gennady's booked to fight in Japan on New Year's Eve. Everybody knows that.
And Daniel Jacobs, he moved up to super middleweight about 2 fights ago. Chavez fight, the Rosario fight. He's not at middleweight. He's not a champion there the way that Jermall is. When it comes to Jaime Munguia, put simply, Jaime is ducking Demetrius the same way that Jermall is ducking Demetrius.
Leonard Ellerbe is trying to deflect.
Leonard, anybody like him, is what's wrong with boxing, particular to this conversation, the American boxing scene. Guys like Leonard are the reason that the audience is getting smaller and smaller, viewership is dwindling, and so is interest. Because here you have two unbeaten, two division champions in their prime. We know they're rivals, and they're not fighting. And rather than advocating for the fight, what Leonard is doing is offering up substitutes, because that's the PBC way. That's the PBC model. Rather than supply and demand,
They substitute
they
it.
substitute the demand with fights you aren't asking for. Fights you don't even fucking want to see. Who the fuck wanted to see Charlo versus Montiel? The only reason that Demetrius Andrade was just in there with Jason Quigley is because Jermall can't find his fucking balls. And Leonard, he doesn't want to help him.
Leonard Ellerbe ain't even his fucking promoter.
I mean, he's not his promoter and he's not his manager. He doesn't actually handle Jermall Charlo's career, though all the same, they both fall under the PBC umbrella. And that's why, in so many words, what Leonard is doing is advocating against the fight and offering up substitutes. You know, Leonard Ellerbe only came into fame because of Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s success as a fighter. He's really just a guy who's still riding the coattails of what is now a retired boxer, because Mayweather Promotions, as a promotional outfit, is just a subsidiary. It's a small-time outfit that has no world champions.
Stop me when I tell a lie.
Leonard Ellerbe, who wants to appear as though he's speaking from a place of wisdom and understanding, when in reality, all I see is a guy who's running that promotional company into the ground. No, all they've got over there is Gervonta Davis. That's why they're so protective of him, overprotective of him. They've got that guy sealed 15 feet of bubble wrap.
It's all riding on him.
If something were to happen to Gervonta Davis, who would stand in his place? Who would take up the reins and champion the cause for Mayweather Promotions, who don't seem to be signing amateur standouts like Keyshawn Davis? No. Keyshawn's a top-ranked fighter now.
Keyshawn, his brother, and a bunch of other top amateurs.
But what top amateurs has Mayweather Promotions signed? What young blood have they brought into the fray to carry the flag into the next era? Because it seems like they've still got it all riding on Gervonta Davis.
You know, he's not a little kid. Guy's like 27 years old.
You're always hearing about the fucking glory days of Leonard Ellerbe and Floyd Mayweather Jr. Newsflash! Floyd is gone! He's retired! What else have you got for us, Leonard? Oh, you've got Gervonta Davis. Fighting who? The way I look at it, Leonard Ellerbe's in no position to talk because he's only got just one halfway decent fighter. He himself resembles a bit of a helicopter mom who won't let her boy play with the other neighborhood kids.
Take a day, lady.
A day off. Comes as no surprise to me that Leonard Ellerbe, the very slimy and disgusting Leonard Ellerbe, is, in his own way, advocating against a Charlo versus Andrade fight.
So what big fights does Al Heyman have planned for him, Leonard?
And you're not advocating that Jamal unify titles with Demetrius Andrade, so what are you advocating that Jamal do?
Because he's not a child. He's 31 years old.
And finally, in heavyweight news, Joyce is in early negotiations for a 2022 fight with Pulev, former world title challenger Pulev of Bulgaria, who was last in action in a boxing ring against Anthony Joshua late last year. He's supposed to be making an appearance this year, before this year is out, in the Trigon over there at Triller against Frank Mir.
Kubrat's only ever lost to top operators.
Quality operators like Vladimir Klitschko, Anthony Joshua. If Joyce is, in fact, in early negotiations for a Pulev fight next year, that essentially means he's not in negotiations for a Tyson Fury fight. It was believed that Joyce was in the running for Fury's next fight early next year, set to go down in February or March, but Fury himself says he's not interested in fighting Joyce. He only wants to fight Alexander Usyk or Anthony Joshua.
He said he'd do a cross-gender fight with Savannah Marshall.
But other than that, he's not interested. Interesting turn of events. Because if he doesn't end up fighting Joyce early next year, or Dillian Whyte, since there's no order for him to fight Dillian Whyte, who does he fight if he fights at all? He mentioned something about wanting Anthony Joshua to step aside so that he can fight Alexander Usyk, and I don't know why the people on his side of things keep beating that same drum. Bob Arum, Tyson Fury. It's not going to happen. Anthony Joshua has exercised his rematch clause, so until further notice, Usyk is not available to you. Will Tyson Fury take that as the green light to keep busy with some handpick instead of an interesting guy like a Joyce, instead of an interesting guy like a Dillian Whyte? If Tyson Fury returns to action early next year, what are people going to say if it's not against either one of those two guys?
Tyson Fury gets away with a lot.
Regularly contradicting himself. I mean, wasn't it Tyson Fury who few weeks ago said that he wanted to fight Dillian Whyte before this year was out, that after he makes it through the Wilder fight, he wants to fight Dillian Whyte afterwards?
I guess he changed his mind.
And he's allowed to do that. It's a free country. It's just that when it comes to Tyson Fury, it's the rate at which he changes his mind that grabs people's attention. How often that happens. It seems like Dillian Whyte is no longer a part of the plans.
Neither is Joyce.
Perhaps that's why we're hearing these preliminary rumblings of what could be Joyce versus Pulev in early 2022. A decent little keep busy fight for Smokin' Joyce. In December, it will have been a year's time since Pulev set foot in a boxing ring under the hot lights, since he had a professional boxing match. Though it won't be a year's time since he's seen any action, because I reiterate, he's supposed to be doing some kind of thing with Frank Mir, some kind of crossover MMA boxing match in the Trigon over there on Triller.
I mean, that'll keep him loose and limber.
Though you have to wonder, if Frank Mir manages to upset the apple cart for Pulev, aging Pulev, who hasn't fought since December of last year, hasn't fought anyone. If by some chance he were to knock out Pulev, would that affect his schedule moving forward for this potential Joyce fight? Does one actually affect the other, even though technically they're different combat sports? I really don't know. If the fight gets made, I like Joe Joyce for the fight. I think that in spite of Kubrat Pulev having only suffered 2 professional losses in his boxing career, to quality operators I might add, there's no shame in losing to yesterday's Vladimir Klitschko, and there's no shame in him having lost to the then reigning heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua last year. There's no shame in that. But it's safe to say that Kubrat, he's getting long in the tooth, he's seen a lot of winners, and his best days are behind him.
Joe's gonna knock him out.
And outside of a highlight reel knockout, I really don't see what Joe gets out of this fight. If you want my honest opinion, Kubrat Pulev would be more of an ideal opponent for Daniel Dubois than Joe Joyce. I think Joe has reached a point to where he needs better fights with better fighters. He made it past Daniel Dubois, his domestic rival, in a battle of the unbeatens.
I would have thought he moved on to something bigger and better by now.
It's unfortunate because there are political boundary lines that prevent certain fights from happening. The ideal candidates for a Joe Joyce fight at this point, who I'd like to see him in there with, are the kind of guys I'd like to see him fight. Guys like Joseph Parker, maybe. Guys like Charles Martin, Luis Ortiz. Those 2 guys, they're supposed to be fighting each other early next year. I'd be more interested in seeing one of them fight Joe.
I'd be more interested in seeing them fight him than them fighting each other.
But politics, what are you going to do? It is what it is. These circumstances and Frank Warren's limited resources, Kubrat Pulev was probably the most familiar name he could conjure for Smokin' Joe Joyce. And he is a familiar name, though as far as ability, what does Kubrat Pulev really have left? He's just something to fill the highlight reels with. At this point, I like Joe Joyce for the fight, and I like Joe by way of knockout or technical knockout, given Joe's size, punching power, gas tank.
His work rate.
Joe's the safe bet, though. What exactly beating Kubrat Pulev gets you at this point in Kubrat Pulev's career? Not a lot.